and welcome to another Mark Bishop Show. You know, the demand for sustainable aviation fuel, SAF as they call it, it continues to grow, and the aviation industry is challenged by limited supplies of traditional SAF feedstocks, such as inedible vegetable oils, animal fats, and waste oils. Now, this sounds like to me that we need an advancement, right, in sustainable fuel. In fact, a 2021 study by the U.S. Department of Energy, the DOE, at Argonne National Laboratory, concluded that ethanol to jet fuel conversion, coupled with smart farming practices and other existing technologies, can reduce greenhouse gases emissions, that's the GHG sign, by 153% compared to petroleum-based jet fuel. That's a lot. So my special guest today, Kevin M. O'Neill, he is the Senior Business Leader, Renewable Fuels for Honeywell UOPs, Sustainable Technology Solutions, the business unit at Honeywell. Welcome, Kevin.
Hi, Mark. Nice to meet you.
Well, the demand continues to grow, it seems, Kevin. Sustainable aviation fuel and how it's cost-effective, lowering greenhouse gas emissions and all of that. I mean, all true or false, mate?
It's absolutely true. Sustainable aviation fuel has really only taken off in the last few years. A lot of the technology that you mentioned about producing, using waste oils and greases was for diesel production as that industry, started to decarbonize. Now, looking at decarbonizing the aviation space, right now there's very little sustainable, what we call sustainable aviation fuel, which is basically an organic or sustainable feedstock-based aviation fuel that displaces the petroleum or crude oil-based aviation fuel that's currently in use. Right now, there's less than 1% of the total jet pool is filled by sustainable aviation fuel. So this is, relatively new. It's an emerging space, but we see it's set to grow over the rest of this decade significantly to several percent of the world jet pool, and then ultimately, 50% or more by 2050 as a way to really help decarbonize the aviation space.
My word, when you consider all of the flights that are going worldwide every day, 7 days a week. How can SAF, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and, well, by how much? I mean, we mentioned a figure of 153% before. That sounds astronomical.
There are ways to get there, and the amount of reduction available from an SAF is really dependent on the feedstock that's used. So in other words, instead of the crude oil, which feedstock you're using in its place, and then ultimately the processing methodology. The oils and greases space can get somewhere in the range of 50-80% reduction. Depending on what's used. Ethanol can be, with the conventional like corn-based ethanol can get down in the 80% range. With conventional technology, there are other things that can be done to reduce the carbon intensity or the greenhouse gas emissions from the ethanol itself, and ultimately driving to a lower carbon intensity ethanol is what helps drive to a lower, greenhouse gas emission jet fuel. So things like carbon capture on the ethanol production itself, and some agricultural improvements in how the corn is grown and farmed ultimately can drive down the carbon intensity of the process, and that can get to the number that you mentioned, 153%. Getting down to a net carbon zero or a negative is certainly within reach.
Wow.
with this type of technology.
Well, interesting you mentioned, coupled with smart farming practices. I guess that is important. I mean, Honeywell, you have developed an innovative ready now solution, apparently, that allows for ethanol producers or petrochemical producers to convert corn-based, what's it called, cellulosic or sugar-based ethanol into SAF. Is this the case, Kevin?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there are several different types of, there are different ways to produce ethanol. Ultimately, ethanol is ethyl alcohol. It's I think people know it from from beverages and that, but it's basically an alcohol that it can be produced typically by fermentation. Corn is the common way to produce it in North America. There are other feedstocks that can be used. Sugar cane is common in, let's say, in Brazil. There's a lot of ethanol produced using that. Cellulosic is what we call the second generation, and that's instead of the corn itself to produce the ethanol, it's using the byproducts, the agricultural byproducts, basically to produce ethanol. Now, cellulosic ethanol is a lower carbon intensity ethanol than corn from the start. So it's actually something that can drive to lower and lower carbon intensity fuel using based on a cellulosic form. But so there are a lot of different innovations in the ethanol space. But again, producing ethanol from a number of those places can be done economically. It can be done at low carbon intensity, and then ultimately coupling that ethanol with our new technology can produce a very low carbon intensity fuel.
So, is it easy to, in one sentence, what is the solution to advancing the sustainability of ethanol to jet fuel applications?
So, adoption of ethanol to jet technology, I think, is the solution to enabling significantly higher quantities of jet fuel to be produced to meet national and corporate goals.
Okay, now what about the overall development? What does it really mean for ethanol producers? Are they jumping up and down?
Well, so ethanol producers, say in the U.S., where the majority of the world's ethanol is produced, and the majority of that goes into gasoline blending. I think ethanol producers are looking at the long-term, viability of the gasoline market. They're seeing electrification as a threat, ultimately to reducing gasoline demand in North America. So ethanol producers looking for alternate outlets for their ethanol, I think, making sustainable aviation fuel from that ethanol is a very good fit for that industry. It doesn't require retooling. The ethanol can be taken and ultimately converted into jet fuel, just as it's produced today, and ultimately and converted into jet.
Well, here's one out of left field for you. I would think a lot of people would think this, and I know the aviation industry wouldn't dare unless it was safe, but it's interesting, isn't it, when you think about it? Does it come to mind? Does the aviation industry, are they excited about this?
The aviation industry is absolutely excited about decarbonizing, because that's really the difficulty in abating carbon emissions in the aviation field is really the challenge that's trying to be solved with this sustainable aviation fuel. So the industry itself is very much looking for solutions that enable lower carbon emissions. You can't really electrify an airplane to fly from New York to Los Angeles. You can't really, at least today with technology that exists. So the way to decarbonize that space, the aviation space, is with sustainable aviation fuel. The industry itself is very, as you can imagine, very conservative. Fuel, you can't just say, well, can we just try putting a different fuel in and see if it works? That's not going to,
excuse the pun,
that's not going to fly.
It's not going to fly, right?
But the industry has very strict regulations, very strict specifications, and SAF has to meet a certain slate of specifications to be usable in an airplane and to be certified. And that's something that's been going on for a number of years now. The industry's ability to certify and ultimately approve these types of fuels for use in existing aircraft without having to make changes in the engine or anything else in the infrastructure.
Wow, absolutely fascinating stuff. So where can everybody go to read up on this? What's the correct website to go to?
Yeah, okay, I'll give you our website. It's tmt.honeywell.com. And our sustainability page, that it goes into all kinds of detail about where Honeywell is in sustainability, all the innovation we're doing. And the renewable fuels page will get you to a lot of information on our ethanol to jet technology.
All right, so it's just www.tmt.honeywell.
P as in Peter.
Okay.
MT.
PMT. Okay. PMT. So www, folks, pmt.honeywell.com, but it's not /sustainability. Just go to a specific tag.
If you get to pmt.honeywell.com, you can find the sustainability page. You'll see it in there.
All right, sustainability page. Fabulous
right
stuff. Gee, Kevin, I tell you what, I hope I'm still around when all this happens. Kevin O'Neill, ladies and gentlemen, Kevin M. O'Neill. In fact, he's the Senior Business Leader of Renewable Fuels for Honeywell UOPs. What is UOPs, Kevin?
So UOP stands for Universal Oil Products. We're a long-time oil and gas technology company.
Fabulous. Sustainable technology solutions, and they're good at that. Right, the business unit at Honeywell. Thanks, Kevin. You have a wonderful week.
Same to you, Mark. Thanks a lot.